All right, everyone, we're going to get started. Welcome to the July meeting of the Portsmouth Conservation Commission. The first item on the agenda, I believe, is minutes, the approval of minutes from the June meeting. Would someone like to make a motion or discuss any edits they have?
I was not here, so I won't.
Okay. Oh, is Jess on, by the way?
Not yet.
Okay.
See her.
Okay. So we won't do a roll call vote until she's
Oh,
on?
right, not yet.
Okay.
Good point.
Okay, so you'll be abstaining.
Yeah.
I'll make the motion. Make a motion that we approve the minutes as presented.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Second?
Second by Barbara. Any edits anybody has? I thought they were looking good. All right, ready for a vote? All in favor? Opposed? Abstaining? Great, thank you. All right. Next item on the agenda is 124 Heritage Ave Wetland Conditional Use Permit, which has requested to postpone. They also have a State Wetland Bureau application. So would someone like to make a motion to postpone both the CUP and the State Wetland Bureau application for 124?
I'll make a motion to postpone 124 Heritage Avenue CUP and state wetland application to the next meeting. I can second.
All in favor? Great. Moving right along. Next on the agenda is the Wetland Conditional Use Permit application for E94 Utility Right-of-Way for Eversource. Is someone here to speak to that?
Good afternoon, Sherry Treffry with VHB, representing Eversource in the matter for the E194 line structure replacement project. I do have representatives here with me from Eversource, should we have additional questions that they are able to answer. For this conditional use permit, Eversource is requesting both temporary and permanent impacts to wetland buffers and temporary impacts to wetlands. Eversource is proposing to replace 12 existing H-frame wooden structures with the same amount of new weathered steel H-frame structures in the same configuration. The current right-of-way contains two 115 kV lines, including the E194 and the U181, and a 345 kV line. The E194 line occupies the southernmost slot in that existing right-of-way and emerges from the Portsmouth substation and heads towards the Portsmouth Regional Hospital. So it kind of comes down along Route 16 and then goes over to Liberty Mutual and the Portsmouth Regional Hospital parking lot areas. So the proposition is to replace all of the existing structure and associated equipment with the existing structure and replace it with all new equipment. The line stays the same, so the structure itself will be placed proximate to the existing structure, usually about 5 or 10 feet away from the existing structure, and then they drill the hole. They will first do the civil work. I can talk about that in a second, but they'll drill the holes, put the new structure up, transfer the existing lines to the new structure, and then they'll remove those existing wood structure and all the equipment out of the right-of-way. For the civil build-out, Eversource is proposing gravel access roads where there is upland area. So those gravel access roads are about 16 feet wide to accommodate the equipment that's required. So there's cranes and bucket trucks that are needed to access the structure and conduct the work, as well as the drill rigs to drill the holes. So they will create these 16-foot wide roads and then 100-foot by 100-foot work pads around each of the structures. For the structures that are in upland, those will be gravel work pads and access roads. For structures that are in wetlands, those will be temporary timber matted. So those are 4 feet by 16 feet wide timber mat sections that are laid out one after the other to create a road, or in the case of the work pads, they're laid out in a relative square and used as the base area to perform the work overhead. The pink that you show that is seen there on the site plan is for upland matting. So in upland areas where there's either maybe some landscaped area that we want to avoid impacting, those areas will be matted as well. They may not be timber matted, they might be, poly mats, plastic mats, depending on what the contractor needs to use to avoid impacts in those locations. The red around, so the access roads are shown with the yellow dash, and then the red around that just indicates that there is some improvement to that access that is required. And then, of course, we'll have sediment erosion control that is installed around, you can see wetland 3 there, wetland 4, and approaching wetland 5. So we'll have access, we'll have erosion controls implemented, and we did our best to try to avoid wetland impacts where we could. We do have impacts both to the buffer as well as directly to the wetlands. The areas in the buffer we would like to remain as permanent impacts with the gravel access roads to maintain existing access for the future. Those roads will revegetate over time. We have evidence of that in previous projects that we've done, so it won't look like a gravel road after a few seasons. It will, but leaving that gravel base in place really minimizes the amount of work that a contractor would have to do to come back and access that structure. Also, within the gravel work pads that are 100 by 100, they will be reduced in size to 30 by 60, just sort of big enough to get access with a bucket truck so they could get up in overhead to a structure to address that. Wetland delineation was conducted last summer. We've corresponded with New Hampshire DES, New Hampshire Fish and Game, and the New Hampshire Natural Heritage Bureau to identify any rare protected species such as turtles and plants. We conducted a botanical survey this summer. We still have one more day to do, but we did not find any of the protected species so far. And we're corresponding with the Natural Heritage Bureau to avoid any areas that may have rare species in them. We have a time of year restriction for concerns with regard to rare turtles, and just making sure that we're not putting mats over turtle wintering habitat where turtles might be hibernating in those deeper wetland areas, or moving matting around while the turtles are in the active season. So corresponding with New Hampshire Fish and Game, got our recommendations, and similar with New Hampshire Natural Heritage Bureau. This project doesn't rise to the level of needing an alteration of terrain permit. The statutory permit by notifications will be filed with the DES for this project. We haven't yet to file those because they have a 1-year expiration on them. We're waiting to file them in August so that we have plenty of time to conduct the work and the restoration following completion before that permit expires. So we will be filing those statutory permit by notification for utility maintenance in the next month. Overall, the functions and values of these wetlands predominantly provide groundwater recharge areas, as they're depressional wetlands within commercial and industrial developed areas. They have some properties that, as I said, for rare species in a couple of them, so that makes them somewhat unique. But, and those are really more pertaining to the larger wetlands on the last page there. And they provide nutrient removal and sediment retention functions coming off the developed parking lot areas that are really right adjacent to those large wetland areas. So this area is both very developed as well as has a lot of wetlands in it. So we've done our best to try to minimize access in these locations coming off of the road and directly onto the work pad to complete these structure replacements. And the work is planned for later this fall, later this year. Have any questions?
Thank you. Questions from the commissioners?
We do have Jess online now.
Oh, hi Jess.
Hello, I am here.
If you have any questions, raise your hand or whatever that Zoom thing does.
Yeah.
Yes,
Or chime in.
I will.
Whatever's easier.
Just a quick one. I just wanted to confirm, I think you said it here and I think you said it in the field, that when you refer to upland area, that does include our wetland buffer, right? It just doesn't include the wetland itself.
Correct.
Okay.
So just to follow on that, then any of the yellow dashed line that is not in a wetland would remain gravel. Is that accurate? Okay.
Yes.
Have there been any other instances in Portsmouth where Eversource has put in a gravel maintenance road in wetland buffers so far? I think there was one that was maybe an after the fact permit. Is that the only one that we've seen?
Hi, Ashley Nicoletti with Eversource. Yes, we've been out in this corridor for several iterations of asset condition replacements.
Yep.
The last round, as you recalled, we replaced some structures over near Portsmouth Ford.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
we had an approved CUP. Originally, we were going through the wetland, and then we worked with Ford to secure an off right-of-way agreement with them
Okay.
to avoid crossing through the wetland, but we had additional buffer from that original application, which is why we had to come back a second time for the after the fact. But yes, in the past, we have proposed doing similar nature work where we're putting in gravel in the upland buffer, wetland buffer areas.
Because I think that's the only one we've seen, the
that
Ford
was-
one.
Just to clarify too, that was
Yeah.
part of a larger project. I can't recall the exact number of structures, but that after the fact was a specific scenario relative to Portsmouth Ford. But we were approved for several other structures across the right of way.
That had that
Yes.
permanent gravel in wetland buffers?
Yeah, the reason we had to come back was because there was a field change,
Okay.
because we removed wetland access and then our buffer
I'm just
subsequently
curious if you could,
increased. Yeah.
you might not have the answers, but exactly where those were, just because you said they kind of revegetate over several years, and we'd love to see, the
Yeah.
aerial photograph changes, which we can find in Map Geo and things, but,
We can certainly provide a list.
yeah. Because I think that's a little, that part about them revegetating.
Yeah, it certainly takes time. I mean, think about your patio out back too.
Yeah.
Like, you have to weed it regardless. So it does take time for vegetation to come back. But over cyclical years of the growing season does
Right.
overcome.
Okay.
So maybe while you're up there, I just had a question about that. How often do you have to come back and maintain these then?
So it's to be determined. I mean, ideally, it's the reason we have that upland access there is for an event of an emergency. But as far as any planned upcoming maintenance work, there's nothing that we are aware of at this very point in time. But that being said, there could be additional technology that makes things more reliable.
That you would want to go in and install?
Right, so emergencies and additional maintenance as time goes on.
And is this a precedent that you have for all communities that you have do this in New Hampshire?
Precedents for,
Doing the gravel,
Gravel
it's,
roads?
I just,
yeah, so that's standard practice across the right-of-way across the state.
because I remember having the discussion over by where the Bed Bath & Beyond was in that area.
Yeah.
And where it slopes down by an old rain garden, and we were making sure that it wasn't in the buffer where you were doing that, and it was also a steep slope, so you needed to do it. So there was a lot of additional justification, which made sense, and so we're just a little concerned about that, because also when you talk about the turtles and just any kind of habitat in that area that is, you know, upland habitat, it's sort of a big impact rather than doing coming in and using the mats. It seems like a bigger impact, so.
Yeah, I mean, in our opinion, it is a temporary impact of the gravel roads being installed, and it gives us that secure base moving forward. We do still see reptiles use that as habitat, still usable habitat for basking. And we have trained individuals keeping an eye out there during the work.
And one more follow-up to that, and you may have already said that, but the size of the gravel and how deep is the gravel?
I would have to double check the spec. Sherry, do you know off the top of your head?
No, but
Yeah.
I would say like the base rock is much larger. I would say probably like riprap. It's like 3 or 4 inches, and they put a good, so they strip off the organic soil and stockpile it, and then they bring in sort of the larger trap rock base, and then they'll spread smaller gravel,
Like 3/4 inch.
yeah, 3/4 inch, and then they'll compact it before they use it.
So it's like a roadway, kind of. And what happens with the soil that you stockpile it, and then,
They'll just use it on the edges of the disturbance and seed it and mulch it when they're done.
And as Sherry described, so where we have upland work pads, so as you can see on the screen here, but there's approximately 100 by 100, which is what's shown. And for restoration is they'll take that top soil, that's windrow, to then restore the pad down to a 30-foot by 60-foot work pad afterwards. So that material is also used for work pad restoration.
right on site, but not located to another area on the
Correct.
site, technically?
Yep, correct. It's used on site. It's not hauled.
Yeah. Like they scrape it to the side of the road, and then they'll use it when they do the work pad restoration.
Okay. Because there's a lot of invasives out there that you're kind of moving around.
Yeah, so as part of our state requirements under our state issued permits, we have to make sure that those areas are revegetated, the wetlands are revegetated to 75%, and that there's no invasive species, that new crop of invasive species within 2 growing seasons. Otherwise, we have to mitigate that, come up with a plan, have DES approve it, and then execute that plan. So prior to us going out there, we'll be making sure we know where those invasive species are and not dragging that soil to a new location.
Okay, thank you.
Just to clarify, the technique you just described, that's just for the wetlands though, that's not for the wetland buffers. Are you required to do any invasive species monitoring in the buffer area?
There's no state requirement because we don't have an alteration of terrain permit on this for upland areas specifically, but it's all part of the BMP manual requirements for the utilities for their, under the permit requires them to follow the procedures in the BMP manual, which talks about cleaning the mats that we put in the wetlands, making sure that all the material's removed off those mats if there's invasive species before they then get transported to the next location. So even though there's not a state permit, there's still the BMP guidance document, and then Eversource oversees the contractors and has a construction rep on site. VHB is hired as the third-party environmental monitor to go out there and oversee the activities as well to make sure that they're compliant with those requirements.
Okay. But there could, in theory, be enough ground disturbance in the buffer zone that some invasive species are gonna be moving around a little bit. Yeah. But it's nice to know that you have some protections in the wetland itself.
I'm just wondering how you would prevent access to these roads. It sounds kind of like a nice place to bike, but then you'd be biking right into a wetland. So I'm just curious, like, once you put this nice new road, like how do you make sure people aren't using it?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we work with the underlying landowners typically if they're noticing activity in this right of way, with it being as developed as it is and as segmented because of the pockets of wetlands. I don't know that I would see as much of a threat as far as trespassing goes, but that being said, if we are notified, we work with an underlying landowner to put either boulders or a gate to prevent future access. It is certainly tough to block off right-of-ways because we don't have the ability to block off the entirety of, you know, the full width.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about the road in particular. It just seems
Yeah.
like you're almost like providing an access that wasn't there before.
Yeah, it's definitely a double-edged sword because we want access, but we certainly don't want other people to then use it to trespass and rut up wetlands.
I will say, on this map set too, we had 2 access points coming in, one from the east side of 24 and the one that's coming in on 21. But we eliminated that access point, so minimizing, we were crossing wetland 9 up there. And we eliminated that in working with the underlying landowner because they had some concerns with their road. They're gonna be paving it. So that was, we were able to minimize that, so it kind of at least takes one of those access points away.
Has it ever been considered to like put some of that removed soil like back on top of the gravel road to a certain thickness and like kind of seed it to a degree? Has that ever,
Yeah,
We've done it.
that's been done in certain circumstances, yeah.
what, like, is that something that would be potentially, could be done here? Or is there a reason why it could
Yeah,
not?
it's definitely dependent on how much topsoil material they generate. Like, what we wouldn't want to do is have to then bring in loam to get sufficient
Right,
coverage, but
right.
yeah, that's certainly a technique we could.
I feel like any bit that could potentially
Yeah.
sustain vegetation growing a little bit faster, I think would be amenable, I would think.
Yeah.
Clarification, and this I might have missed. So you said the mats are 100 by 100?
So the work pads around each of the structures being replaced are approximately 100 by 100. So that facilitates construction, and then when construction is complete, if the pole is in a wetland area, all of the timber matting is removed. But around the upland areas, we would have a gravel access area. But like on the page here, this is all parking. So there wouldn't be any pad after we were done.
So what was a 30 by 60?
The 30 by 60 would be a work pad that's restored from that 100 by 100 down to the 30 by 60. So that gives us enough space to bring bucket trucks in after we're done with the project to replace the poles.
And that's in upland areas?
Mhm.
Okay.
Thank you.
So structure 23, we would reduce that 100 by 100 down to a 30 by 60 in the upland. And any timber matting in the actual wetland would be removed.
Any other questions?
I mean, just to sort of kind of state the obvious here, I'm assuming you've kind of read the staff memo where the city's basically suggesting that you do what you can to not leave permanent impacts in the buffer zone. And our purview here as the commission is to protect that buffer zone and avoid additional fill, additional impact. You're basically creating a road and leaving the road there. I mean, it's a very engineered surface. So I guess I'm just curious, just if you would respond to that directly, if you see any, you can see we've suggested a few different alternatives. Do you see any other sort of options for trying to kind of work with us on that issue?
Yeah, so I think the preference would be to use the wind road material that we use to create that gravel access road and place that back on top and seed and stabilize it so vegetation regrows. Again, the purpose of the road is to continue to maintain critical infrastructure that powers our communities. And it would be our preference to keep a road there rather than remove it and then need to put another road in the future.
It's a lot of work.
It
sounds like a lot of work to me to
And a lot of cost and material. But I will say that they do pull the roads back from the edge of the wetland as well, 15 feet, to make sure that there's no sediment that would get into the wetland following construction. So they will pull it back and restore that 15 feet to the wetland area.
Are you saying 15 or 50?
15.
15, okay.
Is there any-
50.
And usually, like, the timber mats start before they get directly into the wetland, so, to kind of give it a level, flat, stable surface.
and I'm guessing you're familiar with the city's, buffer ordinances, which specifies kind of a 25-foot no-cut zone. I mean, is there any way to increase that 15-foot sort of extension that you provide around the wetlands to at least accommodate that 25-foot?
I'm just thinking about the no-cut piece of that. I mean, this is a working right-of-way, so we have to
Right.
cut this
Yeah.
every 3 to 4 years as a part of the cyclical maintenance. If you'd like additional area for gravel to be pulled back further, we can certainly do that.
And basically extend the precautions that you, provide in the wetland to at least a 25-foot buffer around that wetland, to also just do the temporary timber mat approach as opposed to the permanent gravel road. I mean, that would
Yeah.
be one compromise. I don't know if other people have suggestions.
Are you asking that you put the matting in, or are you asking that the gravel be restored afterwards?
That you use the matting approach as opposed to the permanent gravel road.
Starting at 25 feet from the wetland boundary.
Yeah, I mean, just as a proposal.
Is that something that's possible?
It's possible as well.
Yeah, okay. Thoughts, questions while we have them, before we go into discussion?
I had a quick question. I just realized I don't think there's a detail sheet in the packet for the timber matting or like the gravel road specs, like depth and size of all the stones. Is that something that you guys have that could be provided?
We certainly have a detail for the timber matting.
Okay.
I would have to do a little more digging as far as the road detail, but I'm sure we can get something.
Okay. Like width, depth, all that.
Yeah.
Construction material. And then any probably maintenance of, what that requires.
Mm.
We ready to make a motion? Okay.
Give it a try.
Sure.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the E94 utility right-of-way, kind of for discussion purposes or whatever, but with several conditions which I need help with. One is the one that Kate just made, providing a detail of the timber matting and gravel roadway and maintenance plan for those. And to use the matting starting at 25 feet from the wetland border, rather than the gravel roads, and to take in the removed topsoil and replace it over the gravel roadways, and seed with like a wildlife type mix or something. And I think we're probably gonna have to put some more maintenance requirements in here, but also I think maybe the fourth one is to do invasive species monitoring in the wetland, in the upland, in addition to the wetland areas for 2 years following project. So I don't know if anybody else has
That's all I had, yeah.
more.
To be submitted to the Conservation Commission?
Yeah,
Monitoring
yeah,
plan? Okay.
to the city staff.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say, I'm sorry, invasive monitoring and maintenance.
In the report?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just to clarify with you, does that mean also like removal?
Well, that's what I was going to say, yeah, and maintenance and removal.
Removal of,
Invasive species
Oh,
that
okay.
weren't there before in the upland.
And would
Because
you
it's
say,
already in
like-
their BMPs, but I feel like we should have a little bit of teeth in that if we can.
okay. Yeah.
By having the report?
Yeah, having
Gotcha.
the report and,
Okay.
For the wetland and the 100-foot wetland buffer area?
yeah,
Okay.
the upland area, because DES always already requires it right in the wetland.
Do we have a second and then we can discuss?
I'll second.
I like the conditions that we put on. I mean, I understand needing to get in there in an emergency quicker, I guess. The maintenance part I don't feel is as critical, just because they're gonna be brand new, but again, like the installing newer technology, I kinda get to, and I don't know what people's thoughts are on that.
Oh, I feel like it's a pretty big impact, having those roadways in there, and it's not just putting gravel down, there's gonna be some excavating, and they're gonna be roadways,
They're gonna regrade it to make
Yeah.
it nice and
Yeah.
flat.
and that's huge, and our buffer, we wouldn't allow that, normally, so, and it's not just a little tiny access area either, so, it's kinda,
Is there, just amongst ourselves here, like, allowing for like one, and then, like to get between, they would have to do timber mats, like not have, I'm just looking, for example, on, what is this one? Map sheet 2 of 3, where there's like one to get to the first wetland, then one in between, then one after, and I didn't know, like, obviously it'd be nice to have all of them, but is there some concession, like one is the most critical, and then doing timber mats on a shorter stretch isn't as,
I'm forgetting too, because maybe this will help. I'm forgetting that this is one in multiple of these projects, right? Meaning there's going to be more, because we see and we've heard other polls.
yeah.
I just can't remember to what extent the prior, and if we have any insight into, for future ones, if the same concern would be true, because it would be nice to know if we're able to do something that's consistent and the best solution for the whole series. That makes sense.
Yeah, and that's where, like, I wanted to see the examples that we've done prior, besides that Ford dealership one, because looking back at the aerials of that, like,
That's what I couldn't recall.
that just looks exactly the same kind of as when it was first put in, but I can't really recall how long ago that was. We looked at that this morning. Do you remember when that was?
When the Ford dealership?
When that one was put in versus that one? But, I mean,
That's a good question. I think 2 years ago. And the only reason we realized it was in there was because the Ford dealership was parking cars back there. And we had to
okay.
close it off.
so
I think it was 2 years ago.
so that was a,
On the access road.
okay. So that was a city, like
So
violation?
we treated that as a violation on the Ford dealership site plan approval. And we had, I believe, Eversource come in for an after the fact to make sure it was closed off. But it stayed gravel.
Yeah.
I suppose an alternative view, just thinking on this, could be if there was going to need to be frequent access to this, and they didn't have a more permanent solution, but was fairly aligned with what we think is best practice, and coming in and disturbing, having to put the road in multiple times might be as bad or worse, I don't know.
But they would probably be they would be timber mats, so you're saying installing timber mats multiple times
Right.
versus,
Yeah, that's kind of
one
a trade-off
time.
too, I think.
Yeah, I don't know the logistics either of doing timber mats. I mean, it seems like they might need timber mats to get to the timber mats, so we might not be helping them much. I don't know. Put more timber mats
I think it
in.
is worth noting that I don't think emergency work happens very often on these poles, so they do, I think, like routine cutting of the clearing of the easement area every 4 to 5 years, I think, but there's no real access needed unless there's an emergency.
I mean, I really would like to see the previous ones we've approved. Because if there are gonna be so many more going in the future, just having, like, being the same or improving from what we had before. I don't know.
And maybe here's a thought too. If we seem to be in agreement that this is a fairly significant impact, but a necessary one, but since we do believe that it's going to be a significant impact, should we think about allowing them to go back and consider what we've asked for and tell us what they think is the best to satisfy each, and then have it documented for go forward versus having it in stipulations? I guess I would assert that it is, even though I don't like having to delay any project. We try to expedite, but I think in this case, it might be worth it to examine the options, get them clearly documented. And then that can be a well-documented approach for future.
Which
I-
would
I
allow
kind of-
future applications to go.
Yeah, faster, that's what I'm
Faster, yeah.
thinking. I don't know what everybody else.
So we could change, I could change the motion to postpone.
Yeah, I guess I would ask if
Yeah.
we want to do
I think I
that.
would be in favor of that.
And they still could
Jess
meet
have
their
any questions, by the way?
deadline.
She hasn't said anything.
Okay.
Jess, if you want to speak, feel free to just, you don't have to raise your hand, you can just chime in.
I guess I would be in favor of postponing.
Just to chime in, I agree a lot about what has been said. That's kind of why I haven't said anything. This does feel like a significant impact, and I appreciate both sides of what will have the least long-term impact, but I appreciate Brian's suggestion if maybe the applicant can go back and think through some of our concerns and figure out what feels best practice for them, and then it's not a long you know, we don't have so many stipulations attached to it, I guess.
And a clean kind of view of how we move forward with future applications, I think, is important.
And even though it is
I
a
agree.
large impact and, you know, it's a delay, it doesn't feel like to me there's a lot of other issues. So taking care of this particular thing should allow it to move fairly quickly in a follow-on session.
I'd be happy to change it to,
Do you want to withdraw your motion?
yeah, withdraw the motion.
And I think Alice, you seconded?
Yeah.
You withdraw, okay.
Okay, go ahead.
I can make another motion to postpone 124, E94 utility right away to the August Conservation Commission meeting.
Second.
Okay, do we feel good about vote? So I'm gonna have to do a roll call vote unless we have more discussion.
I just had one other thing.
Yeah.
I don't know that we heard a lot of justification or reasoning behind the alignment of the road. Like why is it going where it is and not accessing from other points? And so in the subsequent application, it just would be nice to hear why it is the way it is, and I guess attempt to minimize the amount of roadway.
Good point.
And I was going to say, and there's opportunity too to provide the specifications for the roadway and the, what was the other one?
Timber mats?
That's, yeah.
Okay. Are we ready for a vote? So I'm gonna do a roll call vote since Jess is on. So Alice,
Yes.
Lynn,
Yes.
Barbara,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Jess,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. Okay, so we will see you next month. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda, we have the State Wetland Bureau application for 550 Peverly Hill Road, city right-of-way and multiple private lots. Someone here to speak to that?
Good afternoon. Brian Colburn with McFarland Johnson. We're the consulting engineer for the city on this project. Been working on it for quite some time. Christine Perrin here with me. She's the wetland scientist that's leading the permitting effort. The project itself is about a mile long. Extends from the north at Middle Road all the way down to near West Road. But a majority of the work is occurring between Middle Road and Banfield Road. The existing road is one lane in each direction, pretty much 24 feet of pavement. It's very good for getting cars from point A to point B, but does little to get bicyclists and pedestrians along that roadway. So the purpose of our project is to improve the multimodal capacity of Peverly Hill Road and provide a critical link to some of the amenities for residents that exist along Middle Road to the residents that live to the south of US Route 1. So the project is proposing to add a 10-foot shared use path to the west side of Peverly Hill Road from Middle Road to Banfield, and construct a 6-foot wide sidewalk on the east side of the road from Middle Road all the way to West Road. With those two, and we're keeping the roadway width at about 24 feet. With that improvement comes new curbing along the roadway. So the roadway currently has no curbing. Stormwater sheet flows off the road and into the adjacent private property. To protect the pedestrians and the bicyclists, we'll be curbing the roadway along its entire length and installing new closed drainage systems. The existing impervious area within our project limits is just a tick over 5 acres. and we'll be increasing that to 6.15 acres of pavement, an increase of 1.08 acres. To mitigate both our increase in flow and to provide stormwater treatment, we are proposing 2 formal stormwater control measures. A gravel wetland, which will be located behind the YMCA and the Park Taekwondo parcel. That is designed to treat 2.64 acres. And we are also proposing an underground infiltration basin using chambers in the DPW parking lot up at the higher end of the southern end of the project, that will treat 0.38 acres. In addition to those 2 formal stormwater control measures, we are also proposing sediment basins near Moffett Road and near Banfield Road. Due to existing groundwater, relative size of the right-of-way that's available to us, sediment basins are really all we could fit within these 2 areas. But those have 1.2 acres and 1.6 acres directed to them, respectively. The cover letter that was sent along with our recent amendment mentioned we had 5 BMPs. The project at one point did have 5 BMPs. We had 2 gravel wetlands proposed, a small one in front of YMCA and one along Greenleaf Avenue. We've consolidated those into the gravel wetland that's shown on the plans now behind the Taekwondo. That's allowed us to pull it somewhat a little bit more out of the buffer than we had originally proposed, and maximize the amount of treatment our project can propose. Let's say we have proposed stormwater treatment basically everywhere where gravity allows us to do so. There are a few places where, just due to site constraints, such as where you're seeing right now near the intersection of Banfield Road, we do have a few direct discharges at existing locations, but we've made sure that at those locations we are not increasing the amount of stormwater flow that's going directly off-site. I think that is it for description of the project, and I'll let Christine describe the environmental aspects of the project.
All right, good evening all. I'll give a really high-level overview of wetland impacts, and obviously we're happy to take your questions if there are any specific concerns you have. We'll start off by saying that the project does not impact any streams or tidal wetlands. There are 2 prime wetland systems designated by the city in the project area, one to the west of Peverly Hill Road and one to the east. The project will result in a small impact, about 67 square feet of permanent impact to the prime wetland to the west of Peverly Hill Road. That's labeled as permanent impact area 8 on sheet 6 of the wetland impact plans. The buffer for this prime wetland, the 100-foot buffer, is where the work will be occurring within that buffer is just the roadway footprint. So we've applied for a waiver from DES in our standard dredge and fill permit application to waive impacts to the prime wetland buffer in that area, since it's a developed area. There are a few non-prime wetland, freshwater wetland systems along the corridor that will be impacted, resulting in just under 39 square feet of permanent wetland impact. And all of these impacts are associated with drainage improvements and roadway grading associated with the widening that's proposed. And all of the impacts take place at the roadside edges of the wetlands. There are no wetlands that will be bisected or completely filled. The larger impact from the project is to the tidal buffer zone associated with the Sagamore Creek prime wetland system. And that's on the east side of Peverly Hill Road. Again, no impacts to the tidal wetland system itself. We're quite a distance from the tidal wetlands, but we are still located in that 100-foot buffer. That impact is just under 9,500 square feet of permanent impact.
What sheet would we find that, what you're describing on?
That should be the last sheet, I believe, of the impact plans. You have the number? Sheet 10. So those impacts are in the upland buffer and are all associated with the construction of the proposed gravel wetland behind the YMCA. So as I'm sure you all know, one of the primary functions of a regulatory tidal buffer zone, 100-foot buffer, is to help protect the water quality of the adjacent wetlands. The proposed BMP will serve the same purpose, obviously, through a man-made attempt versus a natural attempt. But the tidal buffer zone itself will remain vegetated in a different capacity with the gravel wetland that's proposed. The areas of disturbance will be seeded, and there will be some plantings provided around the BMP itself. Therefore, we've applied for a waiver of the mitigation rules for this permanent impact in the tidal buffer zone from DES in our permit application. As far as other resources, we have coordinated with the Natural Heritage Bureau. There are a number of natural communities and rare plants associated with Sagamore Creek that will not be impacted by the project. And we've also coordinated with New Hampshire Fish and Game. There are records of Blandings turtles in the project area. So we will be implementing construction BMPs to minimize impacts to turtles. We are happy to take your questions.
I just had a question about the materials that you provided. So the first section was on the changes since, which I don't think we saw the original application. Is that?
We submitted it, but we never attended a meeting to discuss it with you. We realized there was going to be a delay due to the landowner coordination that had gotten underway once we submitted that application. So we held off on attending. So you did not see the original application in a formal capacity.
So it wasn't on our agenda or anything?
It was not.
So the gravel wetland that you have in the area now, the new area which is behind the YMCA, not the Taekwondo place, but what's behind?
No, it's behind the Taekwondo property, but on the YMCA parcel. So yeah, pretty much where the hand is circling now is where the gravel wetland is proposed.
So did you provide? I see a plan for it, but it doesn't really give it any context as to where it is and what surrounds it. Like we don't see the location, in what area it is in. It doesn't show what's around it. I don't know if you want to show the picture again we had of
so the context to orient yourself would be the property lines. So you can see how the park parcel or the Taekwondo parcel, there's a property line along its parking lot and then comes back, and the rest is the YMCA. If you go to sheet 10 again, RK, if I point to the screen.
Bring the
There should be
microphone with you.
Yeah, and there should be a laser pointer too up there if you want to use that. It might take a second to work. Yeah.
That parcel line is right here, along the edge. So it's located just onto the YMCA parcel is where the excavation would start. And we have small ditches around the BMP to divert the natural sheet flow off the grass around the gravel wetland. But that point is the corner of the parcel that you saw on the aerial image.
So this is like flipped 90 degrees, kind of,
Yes.
like with the roadway?
So that's a really vegetated area right now, right, according to
Yes.
that aerial? And so you're going to be cutting a lot of trees?
Yes.
Can you give an idea
believe
of what the
there's a fair amount of
clearing
bitter-
area will be? What, sorry?
I believe there's a fair amount of bittersweet back there as well that we'll be mitigating.
We've mapped all of the invasives throughout the project area, and we'll be following.
Oh, can you step closer to the microphone? Sorry.
Yes, sorry.
I couldn't hear you.
We have mapped all of the invasives in the project area, and we'll be following best management practices to prevent their spread to new locations. I don't have the areas of tree clearing on hand. I don't know if that's something we could certainly provide, and it's probably, the total area is probably in the full permit application.
How would you access to build that? Where would you be? Would there be more clearing associated with getting to that location to build it?
No, they'll
Ain't
have
it?
two ways to access it. One will be along the pipe that will be coming from the YMCA parcel. So there'll be a 10-foot to 15-foot wide area that they'll have as they trench the pipe through. But permanent access will be off the back of the parking lot for the Taekwondo.
So that pipe that's coming will be going through area that's already vegetated, so it'll have to be cleared to get the pipe in there from the YMCA?
Most of the area that the pipe from the YMCA is going through is lawn.
Okay.
The tree line, if you go back to sheet 10, the tree line starts right there. So from here back to the YMCA, it's through lawn, and then we're through the woods here.
Okay. And you said that's like did you say 10 feet wide? It's kind of swath?
Probably 10 to 15 feet wide, yeah.
And I believe most of that is outside of the buffer. The buffers are labeled on here. I can't read them. But there should be a TBZ line on there that denotes, probably along that dark shading, that denotes the limits of the 100-foot buffer to the
Right.
prime wetland system.
There was no way to get it out of the buffer.
Not without limiting the amount of stormwater we can direct to it. So we tried to balance getting as much stormwater here to treat as opposed to discharging directly to the stream with being in the buffer, yes. I think we needed to find elevation 7 to outlet the amount of water we needed to.
I'm just curious what alternative locations you looked at for putting some of these features in.
Sure, I can, if you go back to the aerial image. We had previously looked at a location along Greenleaf Avenue, right here. Again, that was our other path to a low elevation towelette, which was also in the buffer. Just the terrain, here's the stream, and the terrain around here is steep, and that's all buffer as well. That wasn't really conducive to putting a large stormwater treatment practice.
And are we solving other stormwater issues in the area with all that? Like, I guess I'm just wondering why the capacity is so big. Is it really just taking the water from the path and the sidewalk? Or is it also addressing like other stormwater?
So it's treating almost the entire roadway. We were able to get this to some of these BMPs. Once we start to collect stormwater in catch basins, put in pipes, MS4 rules apply to us. We're going to have an alteration of terrain permit. So we're required to treat all of our new pavement 100% plus a good portion of the existing pavement. So, there is no formal stormwater treatment along Beverly Hill Road right now. So this project should enhance that by treating a good portion of the existing plus all of the new pavement that's being added.
And the multi-use path, is that impervious?
It is impervious, yes. It's paved.
In your, the very beginning of your application, there's kind of a narrative, and it explains, it says currently there's 2 11-foot travel lanes and 2 2-foot shoulders. So in essence, right now, it's 26 feet, is that?
Between 24 and 26.
Okay.
It gets narrow in a couple places, yep.
And then it would now go to 40 feet? Is that right? 24 plus 16?
Yes.
And the shared use path and the sidewalk are both, like, there's curbs and then the paths start right at the top of the curbing?
For the sidewalk, yes. Along the multi-use path, we've provided a narrow grass strip to separate the path from the roadway.
Is that
we're
encompassed
right away and
in that
impacts.
10 foot, or is that an additional width?
That's another additional width.
What do you know what that is?
I believe it's 3 feet
4.
or 4.
Yeah, it was 4, I think, in the plan, if that's the
Landscape strip says 4 feet.
Okay.
So
4
then
feet.
we're at 44 feet width, and we're including that grass strip in between the road and the multi-use path. Is that accurate? Okay.
Yep.
Do you have any, I don't think I saw any, although the packet was large, any like conceptual drawings of kind of what, I mean, I'm seeing these widths and but how it would actually look?
We didn't include it in the package, but yes, there's quite a bit of material on the city's website. This project has a webpage devoted to it. Beverly Hill Road. You can look at the presentations that looked at the different alternatives we looked at, so that there were multiple variations of the roadway layout that were investigated. We went through several public informational meetings. We actually had a public hearing on this project because it does require some right-of-way takings. So City Council found necessity for the project and the ability to take property if needed. But luckily, all of our acquisitions so far have been amicable.
This has been a long project. I'm looking at it now. It's like, yeah, since 2016, is that?
2016, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a big project. We had, there's a lot of property impacts involved. So, we studied it quite a bit. City Council had a lot of interest in the project to make sure that, the project met the purpose of providing that critical connection for pedestrians and bicyclists, but also, minimizing impacts to private property wherever we could. So yeah, this image shows for most of the roadway, we'll be looking at the upper image. Where we've got the 2 travel lanes, sidewalk on one side, the multi-path on the other, the shared or the grass strip with some plantings where we can. And then there are a few places where we've reduced that width to either reduce impacts to a natural feature or to keep within the existing right-of-way. And in some places, we've eliminated the grass strip next to the shared use path, and we've also reduced the shared use path to 8 feet in a few locations. But design guidance is if you're going to reduce to that width for a multi-use path, you need to keep it relatively short. 10 feet is recommended.
And it looks like trees are proposed to be planted in that strip?
Yes.
According to in the 4 feet strip? And that's not the side that the power lines are on?
The power lines move around from side to side. So yes, we've got to place our trees
Yeah.
in a
appropriately.
location that
Yeah, they don't have to be cut.
power company's not going to come and cut them in a couple years.
Do you have you have this table that has original application amendment difference for the impacts, but do you have like impacts, like existing impacts of the road and the shoulders now compared to this application? Like, maybe not in here, but somewhere, because I think that would be really important. For me, I that's what I would like to see.
So the existing road that's out there now,
Yeah.
and
Like what part of that is going through, just in terms of the
Buffers.
buffers? Yeah, sorry,
Okay.
like existing impacts in the buffer now versus the proposed, this application's proposed, temporary and permanent.
I don't believe that number is in the application package now, but we could get that for you.
Yeah, that would, I don't know about everyone else, but that would be important for me to see.
Yeah.
Probably the wetland too, I think. Looks like there's wetland impacts proposed.
Oh,
so
okay.
Both that and the buffer.
Wetland and wetland buffer impacts,
Okay.
existing and proposed.
I just have a question along as follow-up with that is, you don't have the conditional use permit tonight. What is the plan for that? Because we usually see that first, or
Yeah.
on the same day, but then
Yeah.
we look at it first. Because it's kind of hard without, to say, yeah, this is okay for the wetlands one, but we haven't seen the other one, and you might have to make changes later on, or not have to, but we might want to
Right.
talk about making changes later on.
Yeah, understood. Yeah, they got a little out of sync for a number of reasons, but we are working on that now, and we'll be submitting by the deadline for next month's meeting. This next month's meeting, yeah.
Because I would also like to see have a site walk. I know it's hard to do a site walk of the road because it's very busy, but of the area proposed for the gravel wetland behind the Taekwondo location. I don't know if anyone else wants to see that, but
So if you do want to do a sidewalk of that area, probably the best person to coordinate with at the city is Eric Eby. He's our project manager, and he's been the one leading the property owner negotiations with both Taekwondo and the Y.
Would he be able to speak to the gravel wetland construction?
One of us from MJ will
Okay,
attend.
great.
another question. There will also be tree cutting, presumably along the sides of the road for the multi-use path and the sidewalk. Has that been, like, is there a plan to show like which, mostly the large trees, I guess I'm concerned about, which of those are being cut? Have those been identified yet?
They've been identified. We could get you our construction general plans. They show the new, or the clearing line.
Yeah.
We did not survey individual trees.
Okay.
So we have kind of the tree line and where we propose to cut that back.
Yeah, I think in our purview again is the buffer, so if there are those that are being, if the tree line includes parts in the buffer, and I guess maybe in the wetland, that would be important for us to see.
Yeah, I'm not sure, well, I'll have to look at the plans, but the other buffer impact is near Banfield, right? I don't believe there's a lot of trees that are proposed to be cut there. We're pretty much within our footprint.
Okay.
There's a culvert that carries the stream under Peverly Road, and
Yep.
we've made sure to keep our footprint the same over the culvert. So we're not extending that.
Okay.
Sheet 8, yeah. That's, if you go to the next sheet up. So the 100-foot buffer is shown for the prime wetland here. We don't have the buffers mapped for every wetland, only the prime wetlands on these plans, but we can add that
Yeah,
for the
that'd be helpful.
conditional use permit. But this gives you a sense of where the work occurs in relation to the tree line that's been surveyed out there. Sorry, I wasn't close. Ooh, that's weird. So this is a tree line here. Proposed work is, anywhere where there's this bold lines. So this would be grading work down to the wetland. So most of this area is open wetland that would be impacted. And then following along through this buffer area, the work, at least in this area, ends before the tree line.
That's a prime wetland down there?
That is the second prime wetland, yeah.
I think maybe for just a reference, the prime wetland is, and correct me if I'm wrong, so it's right here on Walter Het property, which is at the intersection of Banfield and Pemberley, and then it's across the street leading out behind YMCA and into Sagamore Creek. So they're across the street from each other.
Yeah, it's continuous, yep. Yeah, we're not impacting the other side in that area.
This is a small detail, but it would be really helpful when reading these plans, if it's at all possible to use some color to I'm not sure, to show where the multi-use path is and where the sidewalk is. There's just so many lines. It's very difficult to see exactly where things are, and then make it even more obvious where it's crossing into a buffer or a wetland, because again, that's what we most care about.
Mm-hmm.
And also the wetland, 100-foot wetland buffer, making that very visible would just be really helpful. I struggled a lot with these plans, just trying to figure out where everything was going.
I feel your pain.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can see what we can do to make it a little easier.
We'll be seeing it next month anyway. Any other questions?
Quick one. Sorry, just a clarification. You said the other prime wetland across the street doesn't have any impacts. Is this impacting the buffer, this outlet, the outfall area that's to the right of YMCA?
I don't believe so. I can take a look at what we have mapped. I'm seeing now that the stream itself isn't on the plans as prime wetland. I can take a look at that.
Okay. Yeah.
To see if that's wrong.
Question.
So I have actually two questions, but one has to do with the maintenance or vegetation plan and applying fertilizers. I didn't know if that's across the board or if you had something different, and that's definitely another buffer type of question. Just something to consider, and because of our regulations on fertilizers, and also DES has some on the. And then I had a question about the timeline and when would you be considering doing this work? You probably
So we're hoping to get this project advertised in October, November.
Okay.
It'll take us a bit to award. We have DOT funds, so there's a few more hoops to jump through, but we want to make sure we're out there this winter to do the tree clearing to avoid the bat restriction. So yeah, that's our timeline. In terms of planting details and fertilizer, we're mostly relying on DOT specifications, but we can review those to see if we need to supplement that with anything.
That would be great. Thank you.
Questions? Would someone like to make a motion, so just to decide what we want to do with this?
Be happy to make a motion, but I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure where we're at either.
I would,
Well, you can just, we changed it last time. So.
yeah. well, now I'm going to start in the other direction and
Okay.
say I would like to make a motion to postpone the 550 Beverly Hill Road application till the next meeting, when we can look at both proposals at the same time, and also additional information can be provided.
So requesting the 40-day delay.
And to
From
request
DES.
a 40-day delay.
I'll second.
Discussion? I agree with Barbara, the postponement. I had a lot of questions that I think would probably be discussed more at the CUP level that I think are important even still for the state application. And may potentially alter the project a little bit, such that they would have to come back and alter the state wetland again anyway, potentially, but I don't know.
Yeah, I think it makes sense to look at them both at the same time. Unfortunately, I won't be here, so I feel like I need to just say what I need to say.
Say it.
I think there were already comments made about just like the legibility of the drawings, and I think it would help to have like the whole project in one piece, aside, and then also the pieces, just so we could see relationship of the buffers and where the impacts are. That would help. And I just think we talked a lot about that one BMP behind the YMCA. I mean, that just feels very problematic to me, but I fully understand the struggle to find a good spot for that. So I don't know, I guess I would just be prepared to talk to us about the appropriateness of it, and that it's as small as it can be, and it's taking down as few trees as possible. But, yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Yeah. Any other comments?
And I could just add that if there's a possibility to think outside the box a little bit, I know that road floods all the time and everything, and if you're catching everything on that road, it is going to be a lot of water. But if there's other opportunities for it to, sheet flow somewhere or something, I don't know. Some of it, parts of it, and I'm sure you've already thought about it, but maybe just talk to it a little bit with us. Tell us.
All right, are we ready for a vote? I'm going to roll call again. Is
Still
Jess still
Jess.
here?
Yeah,
Okay.
yep, she just unmuted.
Just one comment,
Yeah.
sorry, I didn't make
Yeah.
it in there.
Yeah.
That clearly we need to make sure that they're clear on everything that we're asking for, so that the next round can be as
Yep.
productive and efficient for them as can be, so.
Yeah, do we want to kind of bullet point something from what we've talked about? Like, yeah, kind of what you do. Well,
Could,
I'm like putting it on you here, but.
No, that's okay. I think
Um,
we've taken pretty good notes, so we
Yeah.
can follow up with an email with a bullet
Get that
list.
to them and help
Yeah.
them, help us make it
Yeah,
expeditious.
That would be appreciated, thank you.
yeah,
Yeah. It's a good project. I'm
Oh my
excited
gosh.
about it personally.
yeah, for sure, me
Yeah.
too.
Totally.
And if there is a site visit, will it occur before the next?
That would be the
Yeah, the
plan,
first
yeah.
first Wednesday of the month is what we try to do, so that would be August 5th, probably in the afternoon. We'll try to coordinate it like a week or two before, if that works.
All right, are we ready for a vote?
Yep.
All right, Alice,
Yes.
Lynn,
Yes.
Barbara,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Jess,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. Great, thank you. See you at the next
Thank
meeting.
you.
Okay. Other business.
Okay. So you have to leave at 5:30, is that right?
Ish.
Okay, 5:30 is perfect.
I won't just run right out the door.
Okay, like Barbara just did.
No, we're kidding, Go,
Just kidding.
go.
I am gonna take a quick bio break. I'll be
Sure,
right back.
sure. For the remaining 3, so one update, 224 Kate Street, which was an after-the-fact wetland permit from, I want to say last year, or maybe it's been 2024. They were required to submit 2 kind of monitoring reports after they did their restoration work in the wetland buffer, which we required. And so I think that buffer got planted in May, April or May. And there's a new property owner out there that sent us report 1 of 2, and basically gave some photos of what's been growing in. He has a pretty well-established no-mow area going on, so looks good. I think he's hoping to send report number 2, I believe, later this fall. So that's update number 1.
And he's a botanist.
Oh,
The
yes,
owner.
I met him.
That's what you told me.
He's a botanist, so that's exciting. Or he has
A better
history of
steward
botany.
than the last person of the property.
So yeah, so that's exciting. He's really excited about that kind of restoration area, I think. So that's good.
Awesome.
Yeah. And then my second update, which is not an update, it's the Article 10 discussion. So I posted it on the website this time and put it in the packet, our last version of what we went through. It hasn't changed since we last went through it. I think the last time we tried to go through it was March or April, and we got to like the 3rd to last page, and then we all had to jet out of here. So I'm wondering if we want to spend like 10 minutes just running through every page saying, yep, still good with that, or nope, not good with that. Elaborate a little if we're not good with any of them, and then just say,
Do you feel like we need to go back through what we went through in March or April?
honestly, probably not, if people remember.
Or just finish where we left off before?
Yeah, we could do that.
You know where that was?
I bet it was probably the table that has the new cutting areas, the 100-foot increase, what page is that? That's page 11. The performance standards page. And so the reason, so the poll that we sent out to find a good work session date, we didn't find a date that worked for everybody, and not that this date works for everybody, but so I guess the planning board chair has a list of his own edits that he's going to bring to the planning board, I think this month, to discuss, and his hope is to get both boards together at some point in August to look at both versions and try to see where they can fit together. So that's why we're trying to do it now, but if we don't get to it today, I don't think there's really a harm in waiting another month or 2 because they haven't looked at their own edits yet. It's just coming from the chair and the rest of the board hasn't seen it. So, but I just thought it would be nice for us to finally kind of get this off our to-do list and have it just ready and waiting for the next conversation. But, yeah, so if we want to start on page 11, that's probably the biggest change that we're going through is the idea of potentially expanding our restriction areas in the buffer. So mostly that's changing that vegetated buffer strip for all wetlands except for a vernal pool because that already had it from 0 to 25 to 0 to 50. So that adds another 25 feet of no-cut area. And then we also talked about changing the limited cut areas to just be the whole wetland buffer. So our limited cut area has restrictions for cutting greater than 50% of trees in the limited cut area that are larger than 6 inches diameter at breast height, DBH. So that would change from 0 to 50 or 25 to 50 to basically 50 to 100 feet in every wetland buffer, which would have pretty big impact. And so I think the following language, we added in the word no cut in front of all the vegetated buffer strip language, just to help really make it obvious that that's what that strip is supposed to be, an area of no cutting. So vernal pools, we changed, 40 feet from the edge to, I'm trying to read 10, 10, 18.22. So we did change this section, which doesn't come up a lot, but when we have things like applications with Hodgson Brook, which has a pretty steep embankment, whenever there's a slope of 10% or more on the vegetated buffer strip that runs at least 10 feet perpendicular to the wetland, we increase that no-cut strip from 25 to 40 feet. So that was already an added protection that we have. So we're going to increase that to 100 feet for vernal pool and 100 feet for the edge of the wetland. So that is pretty dramatic, I think. So that would mean like anytime an application comes before us with probably like Hodgson Brook that has a steep slope that runs perpendicular for 10 feet at a slope of 10% or more, that means that the whole entire buffer is going to be considered a no-cut area. So that's a pretty, I think, dramatic change that we made.
224 Kate Street, would that have applied to that? I
Yes,
feel like
because
there was a
we
slope thing
applied the 40-foot buffer there. We applied it at the motel that's off of the Route 1. Route 1. Where they were doing the EV chargers.
Yeah.
I forget what it's called. The Port
Yeah.
Port Hotel or whatever.
Suites or something.
Yeah, they had the 40-foot, extended vegetated buffer there. So yeah, so that would encompass the whole entire wetland buffer. I don't know if people are still comfortable kind of pushing for that, but
I mean, that is going to be very dramatic.
yeah, I think
What's an alternative then, to do it just a little bit?
yeah. Do we want to be less drastic with that 100 feet?
Like,
And
what if we did, like, the no, no, I don't know. Like, the no cut stayed the same, but the limited cut went to 100 feet instead of to what it goes to now, which is, well, it depends, 75, 50,
yeah.
75, 50.
yeah, so that's what we currently have kind of mapped out, is extending it to 100.
Yeah, but keep the no cut
Oh,
still at 0 to 25,
Oh.
maybe? I don't know.
And you can't build anything in the 100 anywhere, right? Or not?
Well, you can't build anyway, right? That's why they come to us, is that what you mean?
Well, no, they just come to us and they get it.
Yeah, no, they don't.
No.
They don't, not all the
No.
time.
Obviously my purview is to protect the wetlands, but I will also say, how are we gonna manage applications for people, like what was that one over in the south end?
Yeah.
Where the previous owners were already cutting into the 25-foot no cut, and we are now gonna ask new owners or applicants to essentially potentially not cut their lawns at all,
Yeah, because 50
depending on
feet.
how they sit and where they sit.
Right.
Seems like overreach.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like we have a hard time getting people to not cut the 25
Yeah,
foot
that's what
buffer.
I was gonna say. It's already,
And I don't think that's dramatic. I think that's like a good,
yeah.
if they can do, like, if we hold to that maybe even more strongly than we do now, I think that's more important maybe than increasing it to 50.
Yeah. We've had reasonably good luck, I feel,
With 25.
yeah, with people working with us to, but if you make it that much more,
I think 50 is going to be really hard. And then what are we doing instead? We're like, okay, well, how about 30? Like, are we then like,
We're giving up.
like going, that's not a good look either.
Where did this increase come from? Like, are we looking at other communities or like?
I don't even remember.
It came from the round a couple years ago that we all went through, the first round of edits. It may,
Barbara and I were part of, but I don't.
I'm just curious if it's like in line with
other places, or if this is
That's a
like
good question.
ridiculous.
I don't think it is. I think we already, I might be wrong about this, but I think Portsmouth already has the most strict buffer restrictions in the state. A lot of towns just have up to 50-foot, like, buffers. We have up to 100, and then we have restrictions within that 100. So I think we're pretty unique with what we already have.
Is there a way that we can apply it to, like, what about new construction? Or when projects come to us that are undeveloped? I mean, I know Barbara's point is like nothing within the 100-foot, but if they are putting a building at just outside the 100-foot, is there a way that we can be more stringent about what happens, in that space for new construction?
So new construction would mean that, like, could they have torn down a house before? Like, does the parcel have to have been completely undeveloped for it to be considered new construction, I wonder?
I don't know. That's a good question because we have a lot of those projects too.
Yeah, I feel like the majority would probably be tearing something down. In which I remember Lynn, your point with the Christmas tree shops was like, well, you have a blank slate. But I feel like that's also a little bit different when your parcel's like gigantic versus the residential tear down. I don't know, that was also I think I brought this up, like residential versus commercial, if we had like differences between those two for restrictions. I don't know. Or size of parcel.
Yeah, it's tough. It almost feels like you could tie it to the zone, but then the wetland doesn't care what zone you're in, So it just feels like it's simpler to just
keep it for
have it one.
everybody.
Yeah.
And then use our kind of leeway to.
Yeah, I mean, the ordinance could say something in a different place about previously developed land and like how we might give us some guidance on how to consider those as opposed to tear downs or the clean slate thing. But
Here's what the planning board, like, what they think about that too. Because those are our biggest thing, is the previously developed
right.
add-ons or tear downs, I feel like is what we see the majority of.
And when we see the other ones, it's really hard when it's got nothing on the property.
Yeah.
But it's also, people have the property as an investment and they want to be able to do something.
Yeah.
I think that is something I briefly skimmed the planning board chair's edits, and I think that is something that he wanted to bring up is the previously developed sites. And I think his concept was putting it as like a set of criteria, like a third set, like we have the normal one and then the utility one and then a previously developed site one. I think that's how he might have thought it through, but it's definitely on their mind, I think.
Yeah, but again, to your point, like, the wetland doesn't care.
Right. Yeah. But it's almost like how much can we ask them to give back if it's already being completely mowed or something,
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know how you would do that.
When it's already overall one of the strictest and there's already precedent, I think you'd get challenges. We're already seeing challenges, right? So I think you'd get even more extreme challenges.
Yeah.
And, if it were a big enough project with enough monies, you might get challenged beyond just the conversation.
Yeah.
I think. I don't think it's a battle worth.
Yeah.
There's other things that are, I get it. It would be ideal, right? But there's other hills to die on than this one.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Like a little bit of visibility into what other towns do, a tiny bit. The regional recommendation from folks like the Piscataqua Region Estuaries Partnership is 100-foot buffer is sort of the recommended approach. So I don't think we're out of line. And there's definitely communities that have this level of protection. I'm thinking of Stratham and Durham specifically. Durham actually has a little bit more.
We have now, or that we're proposing?
Currently, the 100-foot, yeah.
Yeah.
What does Durham have?
125 around they're around tidal waters. I mean, it's not unusual, I think, for towns to have like a lot of variation across their town. You know, tidal waters versus permanent streams versus wetlands versus perennial streams. Like,
Or prime wetlands, like, we
Yeah.
could do that if there's certain areas that we wanna protect.
right, the higher quality wetland. I also think there's value to having it just be like really clean and easy to understand. Like, I mean, even just looking at the Portsmouth ones, it's kind of complicated, like every 25 foot being a little bit different, like.
Yeah.
And I actually sort of love that we have it consistent as a buffer around every single type of water body, you know, wetland, tidal, stream, whatever. Because I think there's like value in like having it be a thing that everybody can understand and get used to. And so, I mean, what is the like that scenario there of like the 25 foot no cut and then extending to 100?
That's
as
what I
the
was
limited
thinking,
cut?
yeah.
And I'll just say the other thing I've heard communities talk about is trying to like sort of reference the state's Shoreland Protection Act rules, which doesn't cover every type of water body, but you might be able to speak to that better than me, Barbara, but they also have like each little incremental distance from the wetland has a slightly different type of protection around, especially vegetation management. It doesn't cover every type of water body though.
The vernal pool, like, I think it's great that it's to 50, but like, I mean, we're trying to map, I feel like that's so hard because our maps are like ever changing, right? Because sometimes they're there and sometimes like they're not. So how often does that even get enforced, or that we know there's a vernal pool on a property?
We haven't seen a lot. Usually the wetland scientists on the project will flag it and throw these buffers on it. Or if we, based on our old vernal pool inventory, if there's a project that we know has a vernal pool on site and they haven't mapped it yet, we'll require them to map it.
So you think that's okay keeping that like as its own separate
Category or
area?
jurisdiction.
Yeah, okay.
Pretty standard.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think we've seen one in a while for an application.
For vernal pool.
Yeah.
I just wonder if they also just get missed a lot.
Yeah. I mean, there's that.
Well, also, I'm just going to chime in. When they built the houses up on Sagamore, and all we could comment was the drainage that went under Sagamore in across the street, like towards the creek. That wetland scientist noted that that was not a vernal pool because it was the really height of the drought. And so it was all dry and there were Phragmites in there. But living near there, I know that is a very active vernal pool. There's peepers in there all spring. So I do feel like that's a little tricky too.
Right. That's why I feel like it probably gets missed a lot.
Walker Bungalow, that was an example.
Yeah.
That was pretty clearly a vernal pool back
Yeah.
there. But which didn't really get missed, but.
Well, I think then keep it at 0 to 50, obviously, for the vernal pool, and maybe we just think about our identification of them when projects like come through. How we have them prove or disprove that there's one on the property, maybe.
Yeah, as a
Questionable.
certified state wetland scientist, you're required to note any vernal pools that you see while walking the property, I'm pretty sure. And if they are not delineating within the season of the vernal pool, but they suspect there is a vernal pool, they're required to go back and validate it. At least for, I think, state applications. But I mean, we don't always see actual wetland scientist applications. Sometimes we just see people using our maps, so that's tough. And maybe that's something that we've talked about kind of internally, and I think after Mark gave us the new wetland map, we talked about maybe we should do an updated vernal pool map of the city. I think we have a lot of ideas of where there are ones that we haven't mapped that we could probably hire someone to just go check out a list of areas in the spring next year or the year after. But that's a good thing that we need to start kind of harping on maybe a little bit more. So are we kind of leaning towards scrapping that first column of edits in the no-cut area? So keeping vernal pool at 0 to 50 and then everything else at 0 to 25?
I think so.
I think so.
All right. And then limited cut,
Maybe start that at the 25 and go to 100.
so stretching all the way. I mean, the limited cut almost never really comes up.
Sorry, what is our limited cut?
So you can't remove vegetation that has a DBH of 6 inches or more. You can't remove 50% or more of that. So right now, like for any inland wetlands, it's 25 to 50 foot buffer. So if there's like 6 fully grown trees, you can only remove 3 of those.
Well, your comment down below says this may be too extreme. If we cannot enforce this, then it could weaken the zoning ordinance.
Look at that.
Number 3, which I agree, like, that seems absurdly hard to, like,
Yeah.
regulate.
Other than if they come in to like build a whole bunch of houses and
Yeah.
they have to
Show us what they're cutting.
show us what they're cutting.
Yeah. That- I don't know, I still think keep it at 100. Or have it go from 25 to 100.
See what the planning board thinks.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see what they say.
And that's, I always wonder this, like, is it 50% per proposal? I mean, can they come back in 5 years and propose another 50% cut?
Good point.
know?
Tracking of that is difficult.
Yeah, what if they plant a bunch of trees and then, like, however many years later,
Right.
we're gonna now cut down these other ones over here because I don't know.
exactly.
That'd be very,
Diabolical.
yeah, not thought put into that for like a plan like 10 years in the future or whatever.
Do you have to get going?
Yeah.
But I think we do see that sometimes around.
I've got to take off, folks. I got to be
Thanks,
somewhere
Brian.
at 6. Thank you.
Bye, Brian.
Going to be in Colorado for 10 days hiking.
Ooh,
Great.
have
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah.
Stay cool.
Yeah.
Excited.
Yeah.
See you all later.
I hope you don't have any forest fires erupt.
I
Oh,
know.
geez.
They're always nearby in the summer. We go quite a bit.
Oh, gosh. All right, well, stay safe.
Yeah,
See you,
take care.
Brian.
Have fun.
Okay, so I'll leave the limited cut column with the edits.
So your number 3 here where you say like the removal of any trees in the wetland buffer, blah, 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 like that whole 6-inch DBH, is that like, that must be taken from somewhere?
So that's already in there.
No, but like
oh.
where did that, is that like
That's a prior to Kate question.
yeah, I mean, it's just
It's like DES's though, right?
okay.
Is that the similar
Yeah,
size
for the
of shoreline?
For
shoreline?
the shrine, that's what I
Yeah.
was asking.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, they're more.
So then this is, we just leave that? I think that's standard.
So we'll include that new edit with the 100-foot
Yeah.
because we'll keep the limited cut column. Okay. And just to go back to the page before, page 11 at the
Yeah.
bottom, that 10.18.22. So should we just keep the slope requirements as they are right now, which is increased to 55 feet if it's, let's see, if it's, remember that?
Yeah,
For a vernal pool and 40 feet for any other wetland?
I kind of think so. That 100 feet is still going to be like,
It's pretty gnarly for no cut.
I just think of Kate Street, which, 224 Kate Street, I mean, that would be like,
It would include the house, it would
yeah.
include the driveway.
That's a lot.
Okay, so keep as is that how we're feeling?
For the vernal pool and for the steep
Right.
slopes.
For each, yeah. Okay. All right, so let's hop,
We could like think about that, like the limited cut, how to kind of explain that.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, the Shoreland Act does have a very specific way of like scoring the trees and the size of the trees, or whether there's like, even just like a statement, like the expectation is that, you know, within that buffer area, that it's roughly half sort of naturally vegetated, or something like that, that may be like a little easier to understand.
Or could it just be that like you have to prove to us why you're cutting the tree down? Like, because the first line says what, that it's discouraged, right?
Yeah.
yeah.
So
Right. Yeah, it's gotta be part of your
you gotta have
justification
a
or something.
justification for it. Any tree? I mean, again, I don't know if we want to do the size thing, because like cutting down, I don't know.
It would be interesting too if we had an application that, like, a majority of the property was forested, and someone has to go out and count like hundreds of trees to know what would be the 50% number.
Yeah.
And maybe that's easier than I think. Maybe it's just like a canopy assessment or something.
I think keep your number 3 as is and just, I mean, not as is, as you changed it and just see what happens.
Okay.
This one?
Okay. Right, moving on to fertilizers, we just added in language about NOFA, that it should be in compliance with NOFA standards.
You commented, do NOFA standards still require this?
Oh, I did, yes, look at that. I think so. The last time I looked at the New England ones
Okay.
were, I think last fall. I'll have to double check this. But the slow release and low phosphate, I think it's still a NOFA.
Okay.
So
So
I'll
that-
double check.
And that would extend for the full 100-foot buffer?
Yeah, wetland buffer, so it would include everything.
So that's like a nice, that would simplify it a little bit. I'm thinking like that diagram that currently has like 2 different fertilizer zones.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it already includes the 100-foot, so that's good. Then we'll hop down to wetland boundary markers. We're making sure that those are installed prior to the project starting so that construction workers and people on site actually see it and are educated by it. I wrote, let's have a discussion about the situations where an exemption may be appropriate for wetland boundary markers.
Well, I think one, if they're having other signage, other educational signage, and they kind of use that. And there was the whole.
Well, there's like the Creek Farm
Yeah.
pushback where it was
Yeah.
like too natural for a sign. And then the other one we've heard is like around the mill pond.
And the
That
forest
was like too developed for a sign. You know, we sort of heard both sides
Yeah,
of
like
that.
one it was too obvious and one it was like, we don't want it to be. I don't know. I mean, my thing is that, what, they're like this big? And to put one on a tree? I don't feel like is that.
I heard an interesting thing from a neighbor around a property where we had asked them to put the markers on, and the neighbor interpreted it as that there was like sort of legal action was being taken on that property, that it was sort of like this mark that we had,
Oh, interesting.
that the property was sort of under scrutiny by the city,
Oh.
which is sort of interesting that that's the way it's being perceived, and maybe we could try to just message it a little bit
Well,
differently.
it's just supposed to be educational.
No, exactly, right? And we'd like every property to have it, regardless of
Yeah.
whether they, they've ever asked for a permit or not. Anyway.
Well, I mean, it is the ordinance, and if, I don't know, if somebody saw
Yeah.
mowing beyond that line, I think it would be an easier way to enforce. So it's not exactly only educational.
Yeah, no, you're right.
But
But
It's nice that it doesn't have like specifics about where to put them.
Yeah.
So it's up to us. If
Yeah.
someone's really like peeved about putting it
yeah,
right on their boundary, we can say, throw it in the wetland or throw it on this tree that's a little bit further away.
yeah. I don't think we need to put anything more in there about that. I think how it is good, and then we have the discussion with the homeowner. But I understand like having us all on the same page as to, yeah. Yeah. But definitely prior to the project construction would be great. They did that on those Banfield houses, I think I told you that, they're being built, or the Peverly
see
to
that? Yeah.
Banfield. Yeah, they're placed, and the dig line is like right there, I'm like, all right, thank God those are there, I guess.
Yeah.
somebody paid attention.
Hopefully they stay there.
Yeah, I know, I look every time, I mean, I drive that road multiple times a day, and they're there.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I have to scoot. Good night, everybody.
Thanks,
Okay,
Jess.
thanks, Jess.
Bye.
See ya.
Right.
So we still got
Snow removal?
4, so that's enough for a vote. Okay, good. Just double checking. yeah, okay, next section, snow removal. I think this was an addition from maybe us earlier this year or a couple years ago, where we just wanted to really specify and, you know, a pretty obvious stipulation for a lot of these parking lot projects is snow removal stuff that we always add in. So making that more aligned with our ordinance. So basically moving any snow storage outside of the 50-foot and making sure there's signage. And if there's areas outside of the 50-foot that are not possible, the snow will have to be transported out off-site. And then also we've talked in the past about the Green Snow Pro certification, which seems to be pretty prevalent with a lot of winter maintenance companies around here. So I think that's probably safe to keep in here.
Yeah, I know sometimes there's like, in the maintenance sections from applications, they say if it's over a certain depth of snowfall is when they'll transport it off-site. I don't know if that's something, like I'm recalling like the Ritchie lumber, like that, the corridor right next to North Mill Pond as it goes out to all those buildings that are being built. I kind of remember them saying like, well, if it's over, like if the bank gets over a certain height, then we'll transport it off-site. I don't know if that's anything we need to have in here or not about that, but, or if this is good enough as a starting point, and then it depends on the property.
I feel like this probably is being said with this, but we are always asking them, like, where are you putting the snow? And so if there's like a couple of words to add in here to just like really dial down, like a winter maintenance plan could be a written document. Like we really do kind of want to see on the plan where they plan to put the snow.
So yeah, designated and marked in the field and on a plan within the submitted winter maintenance plan. Yeah, I think that's.
Well, I guess in salt storage too. I don't know.
Oh yeah, is that in a different?
Oh, I think that's.
Is that somewhere else?
I don't think we included that. But
That's a great spot.
Yeah. Okay.
It has to be covered.
Is that the same? Is the same thing with salt? Is it outside the 50-foot? Is that what we've been asking, or outside the 100-foot?
I don't know. No,
We haven't seen a lot.
I mean, I feel like it should be this. It would be easiest if it was the same as what snow removal is, just in terms of simplicity. But
there is somewhere where it says it has to be covered and everything, so maybe there.
in our ordinance, we have that.
I think so, don't we?
In like site plan regs maybe? Or,
I mean, we can check afterwards.
yeah,
if
there's
you want.
nothing in Article 10, but maybe there's something.
Because isn't there something about like, aren't there roads that are supposed to be low salt use
Yeah,
and?
not in this,
Okay.
not in Portsmouth.
Okay.
Most of them eventually.
So they just say use salt are their best management practices, I think,
Yeah.
as to how much and that sort of thing, and maybe that needs to apply to, maybe it already does to parking lots too, and.
Yeah, so it would be, well, people, not retro, but it would, anybody coming with an application, they would have to do the green snow.
Which
Pro
has that
certified.
in their kind of regulations.
Doesn't
Okay.
necessarily mean that everybody's doing that,
Yeah.
but they're supposed to report, that's part of their certification, so they report back and say how much they used and.
Yeah.
Okay.
Excuse me.
But old parking lots, we don't have anything, you know, ones that are already existing, we don't have any say over.
Is that the end, Kate?
So no additional salt kind of text in here?
Other than maybe something on the storage, but
Yeah, maybe
we
just
should
on the
make sure
storage.
it's somewhere else.
Just marking it on the plans? Or keeping it the same as the snow, which is outside the 50?
Yeah, and marking it on the plan. Maybe
Okay.
just kind of do that all the same.
Okay, so I'll say an application with parking lots and or roadways on site must designate and mark with signage in the field and on plans, snow storage and salt storage areas outside of the
Yeah.
50-foot.
I think that's good.
And
And then I guess just double check
So-
that,
I'll rename the title of that section to add salt.
just say winter maintenance, or winter,
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know,
And
yeah.
that second sentence will read if snow and salt storage.
And then I think, yeah, because we have the Snow Pro certified companies, then that kind of dictates the, best usage of salt.
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, sorry, the second sentence does make sense. It doesn't make sense if I add and salt. So if snow and salt storage areas outside the 50 are not possible, the snow must be transported off-site. Maybe we just keep it and snow storage.
Yeah, just for that second one, just say if snow storage areas.
And kind of the limbo area will be,
If
well,
they have a salt
isn't
problem, then we'll
allowed.
talk to them about it.
Right, then we'll have to.
Do we need to say it needs to be covered in this or not?
Salt,
Salt,
and, yeah, and we can say
covered salt storage areas?
outside the 50-foot.
Yeah.
And covered. Okay,
Just to cover all bases.
so, snow storage areas and covered salt storage outside of the 50-foot, okay.
I think that's good.
Yeah, I think that is,
That's
Yeah.
it.
One other thought,
Yeah.
you know how folks oftentimes, like, and maybe it's referenced in here specifically, the date at which this ordinance was adopted, right? And there's sort of a pre and post,
Yeah,
like, depending on the property.
yeah.
I feel like we might need to put that date in here so that we're not like reverting to like 2026 in terms of like what applies to property.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like
But do we
what-
do that when it's
enforcement?
been, we can only, I mean, it's only when it's been approved by the city council, right? When that date,
Probably, right?
you mean like when this was updated? Like have
Well,
it very,
I guess I want to, the original date, whenever this was
Oh,
a
in
current
like the
ordinance, to have that like in there, you know, that
90s
this
or
is,
or late 80s?
keep that date as the, you know, so every property that was developed since then was developed with these ordinances and they don't have any additional excuse for
Oh.
not honoring them. Do
Yeah.
you know what I mean? How some of the older properties.
Right,
use it as a,
Yeah,
grandfather.
I think,
yeah, exactly.
so there's a section at the bottom of the zoning ordinance online that like lists all the different dates of the updates. I believe it shows when it first came out, but maybe I'm wrong about that.
I don't feel like we've had anyone
Actually, it doesn't.
say this doesn't apply to me, have we? Because of time or like date?
Yeah, I mean, they often say like, oh, my property, you know, it's 100% in the buffer because the buffer
Yeah.
rule came into play well after my property was developed.
Yeah, no, yeah.
Just to somehow, yeah, have that sort of in here still. But this update is consistent with the ordinance that was put into place in 1982 or whenever it was put into place.
Yeah, I don't know if that's, if there's like a place for that in this article,
Yeah.
or if that's just a general note somewhere in the ordinance that the original ordinance was 19, you know, whatever it was. It says adopted by City Council in 2009, effective 2010, as amended through 2019. That's not true. That's got to be updated. But yeah, you know what? Nothing says when the original zoning ordinance came out, or the original Article 10 came out.
Yeah, I can see how there'd be value in having that
Yeah.
stated, even just like right under the title, starting the whole ordinance.
Like the original Article 10 published
Yeah.
date.
And then with updates through, 2026 or whatever, if they need to put that, but the date of the most recent updates.
With updates up to 2026. Yeah, that's a good idea. Trying to, maybe we can weasel that into like that first page, like you were saying. Weasel it. I don't know why I said that.
You can figure it out. I don't know how you
Yeah.
find that out, but.
Yeah, I'm sure we can try. I'll see when that original date is too. It might be kind of tough to pull out, but
Yeah, okay, so here's where I was thinking it's 10.1014.13. There's like, you know, this 1970 date, and then there's also reference to adoption of this ordinance shall be judged according to the conditions of existing at the time an application for building permit is filed or submitted. I don't know.
Filed or submitted. So you're saying just like add a sentence on to the end of that saying, this was
Yeah.
last updated?
I don't know if that's the place to put it, but
Okay.
that's what got me thinking that it might be nice to just have the date somewhere
Yeah, instead of
up
having
front,
to scroll
probably.
to
Yeah.
the bottom. Okay. Maybe I'll just put that in as like a comment on the side instead of doing a red line for now.
Sure.
And we can
Yeah.
just discuss it.
Do we need to, like, vote on this? or-
That's what I'm thinking. It'd be good to finalize this as a version that will be sent to the planning board.
Okay.
Hopefully there's just enough of you to vote on it. I don't know if we're comfortable voting on it with just 4 of us.
I mean, it's not like this is the last, it's not, I mean, we're gonna have other opportunities, yeah.
Yeah. And you know, we might read through it again at a work session with the planning board and maybe one of us will be like, oh, wait, I don't actually like this anymore.
Yeah, which is
And
fine.
we'll scrap it right then and there. Okay.
I'm okay voting for it, knowing this is, nothing can't be undone.
I think everybody's had time to think about it and look
Yeah.
at it too.
Okay.
All right, so then does someone need to make a motion to, what, to
To
vote on
approve the draft edits of Article 10 to be submitted to the planning board
Yep.
for review?
Yep. I can't make it.
I'd like to make a motion to, that the commission approves the changes as identified here and, you know, make a recommendation to the planning board that these changes be considered. Is that?
Yeah, perfect.
Thanks.
We have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Nice. 4-0. Woof.
Did you mention the dates that he had to everybody?
Oh, God. God, you said that.
Dates.
Good point.
Oh,
So,
for the planning board.
Since we
yeah.
got through this tonight, so I did mention that the planning board, they haven't seen their chairs kind of edits yet, so I think they have to sit as a board and go over their own. I don't know if that'll take one meeting for them this July, or if they'll need multiple. But the earliest kind of date we were throwing around for a joint work session would be an hour before their normal August meeting, which would be from 6 to 7 p.m. on August 20th, which is a Thursday. And then if that doesn't work for a lot of us, then another backup would be the week following on Thursday the 27th from 6 p.m. onward. So
I couldn't do that one, but
okay. And then, you know, if it comes back that the planning board isn't quite ready to sit down with us yet, then we'll throw out some dates for August. But it sounds like the easiest way for them to meet with other committees is to have it done an hour before their meeting. So if people are available from 6 to 7 on a Thursday night, that's usually their best time.
And what, if this is in August we're looking at, or is this?
This is late August.
Late August, yeah.
That's the earliest we could think of.
August 20th.
I might
was
have found the 20th, but that's fine.
You're not going to be here on the 20th?
No.
Okay.
27th will be fine.
Okay.
It's like Sam's not.
Well, that's a possibility. Let me just put it.
That's day one of school
Yes, I
starting.
know, that's why I was.
Oh, they start on Thursday.
Yeah, that's why I was a little hesitant.
Yeah.
Oh, that's odd.
But I'll put it in here and
And it's a full day, is that?
I think it's a,
Okay.
yeah, I think it's a full day.
Jeez. So the 20th is the first day of school?
27th.
Oh, 27th.
Yeah,
27.
27th. That was my hesitation with the 27th.
Okay.
I can't do either one. Sorry.
That's okay.
It's okay.
Or would you be able to make the August one if it was or September, if it was
Probably.
September 17th?
Nothing scheduled right now.
What is it? September, I'm just gonna write all these in here.
September 17th,
And these are all 6 to 7.
6 to 7, potentially.
6 to 7. All right.
And it might be that, you know, an hour is definitely not enough time for both boards to kind of go over their edits and then mesh them together and discuss everything. So it might be that this turns into kind of multiple work sessions to try to get this to the council.
It'd be good to do it like bite-sized chunks, though. You
That
know,
might
it
be
doesn't hurt
easier.
to start, you know,
Yeah,
just
like,
so we can like quickly
we
figure
present
out like, what are
ours,
the.
they present theirs.
Yeah.
And we look at it for a month and then we decide how we want to, yeah. Okay. Well, I will probably send out yet another poll just to make sure people can make those dates.
Well, it's better than the last one, which
Yeah.
had so many dates.
Yeah,
and
I just threw as many dates as I
did
could.
the best you could.
Yeah, everybody's so
Summer's
busy this
hard.
summer.
Summer's really hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's totally understandable.
Then school gets started, that's also really hard.
Yeah.
So many after-school activities. It doesn't really
Sports,
get
yeah.
easier.
Yeah.
We'll just make it happen.
Okay. Well, thanks.
Meeting adjourned.
Okay.
Okay.
That was good.